Hey everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Spacebar. This is episode 20. We've made it to episode 20, transitioning to using in-ears with your band. Behind the Spacebar is a podcast for musicians, music directors, playback techs, really anyone performing on stage with Ableton Live. In fact, last week, this week, and next week, I'm kind of expanding it. It's really just anyone who performs on stage, anyone involved in production in any capacity, any style, any venue. This show is a great show for you. Occasionally we go deep on tracks and Ableton and things like that. But today's show, we're smack dab in the middle of a series all about using in-ears and using in-ears on stage with your band. Last week we talked about why you should use in-ears with your band. This week we're talking about how to make that transition. And then next week we're going to wrap up talking about how to improve your in-ear mix. And I say we're smack dab in the middle of a series. This is a 3-part series on the podcast. On Wednesdays, as we're talking about content for worship leaders and folks using tracks and stems in church, we're diving deep on all things in-ears. So if you're a worship leader listening to this, make sure to head to the YouTube channel. I've got the link in the show notes of this, or maybe you're watching on YouTube. And again, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on this. Last Saturday, we talked about choosing the best in-ears for live performance on our Saturday gear focused content. So we are just, again, we're all about in-ears right now and in this month, and really for next month as well too. And a lot of really good content. So today we're talking about transitioning to using in-ears with your band. This is something I've taught a lot, particularly at worship conferences and churches, and transitioning, a group of volunteers, a group of people who don't have a lot of experience playing together to in-ears. But this content applies, and this I've added some extra things in here. This is just broader and wider. So this is not going to be just focused on worship leaders, not just focused on applying this with volunteers. This is focused on, you trying to help your bandmates come along to using in-ears. Maybe you've been using in-ears for a while. Maybe you've had them for a while. You love it. You're trying to get them on board. You sent them last week's episode, and they hopefully learned the reasons why they should use in-ears. But this is how you can kind of make that transition and get them on board. Maybe you just joined a brand new band and they're still using floor wedges, and you're like, guys, we got to start using in-ears. This is the process you're going to walk them through. So let's dive in. I've got a couple pointers here. We should be in and out pretty quick on today's episode, knock on fake wood. Of course, I always say that and it takes longer, but we'll see. Okay. So number one, if you're going to transition your band to using in-ears, and I don't care what the context is, I don't care if they're pros who have been traveling and played for a long time but never use in-ears, or a group of volunteers at a small church that are not professionals and don't play professionally. I don't care who you are. I don't care who your band is. The first step, most important step of all this is to cast vision. If you're not casting vision, you've got to make it all about what's in it for them. You can't just say, hey, I listened to this podcast with this Ableton Live certified trainer guy, and he said that we should be using in-ears, so we're going to start using in-ears. Why do I care? What the heck? Like, how does that apply to me? That means nothing to me. There's no benefit in it for me. But as opposed to that, if I come out and say, hey, how amazing would it be to stand on stage and actually be able to hear each other play? How amazing would it be to walk into any venue and know that the sound we're creating for the people in the audience is enjoyable? And how great would it be to have a pretty inexpensive, easy way for us to sound better? So go back to last week's episode, send your bandmates that link if you want to, or kind of listen to the material, then you can go preach it yourself to the band. But you've got to give them benefits. Revisit last week's episode. You've got to make it all about them. What's in it for them? It's going to improve their experience. They finally don't have to battle any longer with, more of me, less of them, and going back and forth with someone. They're going to have their own customized mix. It's going to be a great experience. Their guitar tone is going to be better. They're going to be a better singer. It's just going to be a way better experience. You got to cast vision. Because again, if you just come in and say, we should be using in-ears, nobody cares. I hate to tell you, nobody cares. You're pumped up. You've been listening to podcasts. You've been watching other bands. You've been going, okay, most everyone I respect and look up to is using in-ears. We should do this too. They haven't. They don't care. They're just doing it for fun, just doing it for them. So you've got to convince them. Okay. Number two, after you cast vision to your bandmates, maybe you're the person in charge, and it's less of casting vision and more of here's where we're going, but here's why I want to go there. The next thing you need to do is set a timeline. This is the biggest mistake I see. Gosh, I'll go to a conference and I'll teach a concept using in-ears, playing with a click, playing with tracks. And like a week later, people are trying to implement that with their band. I'll see people reach out on the site often and say, hey, I've never used Ableton before. I just signed up for your subscription and I'm taking the Tracks 301 advanced class and like, it's way over my head, but I have to have this in a week. And I'm like, well, don't take the advanced tracks course. Like take Tracks 101. There's a reason why I have a quick start course, because you need a quick start. Like you're not an Ableton expert. You haven't used Ableton for a while. It's going to take your band a while to get used to it. It's like picking up a guitar and being mad that you can't play Eruption yet. And you're like, well, it's an instrument. It takes a while. So you've got to set a timeline. So here's what I always say is say, hey guys, we're going to start using in-ears. Let's say at this point you've convinced your band that you should be using in-ears. You'll say, hey guys, we're going to use in-ears, but in 2 months, we're going to do our first show with in-ears. Well, between now and those 2 months, every single rehearsal, you need to be practicing using in-ears. You need to be setting up in-ear mixes, helping each other. I'll share a tip here next that you may never have thought of when it comes to in-ears that I think would really benefit you and your band. But you need to spend some time doing it before you actually have to do it. So don't say, hey, we're going to transition to in-ears. We have a big showcase coming up. And the first time we ever use in-ears is going to be the chance that we have to like make it big. No, that's a really bad idea. Don't do that. Spend time practicing up to that. Spend rehearsals leading up to that point. Spend time training, getting outside help, whatever you need to make that happen, so that when it comes time to actually make the transition, you've got that timeline, you've put in the work and done it, and not just tried it for the first time on stage where people are going to hear how bad you sound and how uncomfortable you feel because of that. So third thing, and this is maybe something you never thought of when it comes to in-ears, but consult outside help. Get outside help. Get an audio engineer that you know that you've heard mix before locally to come help you with your in-ear mix. Even if they've never created an in-ear mix before, they have the tools and the ability and the skills to create good mixes. So what they could do is listen to your in-ear mix and help provide some guidance. Part of, and we'll talk about this next, part of the reason why transitioning to in-ears is so difficult, typically, let me put it in the church context for a second. Part of the reason why it's so difficult is we don't, spoiler alert, our next point, provide training for our team. We take people who have never mixed anything before in their life, and the entire hope of their performance is laying on them who have never mixed anything in their life before, and they're lost and they're stressed and they're struggling. Get some outside help. Get someone that can come into your rehearsals and go around and listen to in-ear mixes and go, hey, how's it sound to you? You know, a good audio engineer will ask, how's it sound to you? And they'll say, sounds muddy. Or when the drummer really starts playing, I'm struggling to hear it. And then the audio engineer can go, oh, okay, so let's try this. What I want you to do is we're going to put a compressor on the drums so that when they really start digging in, it's going to just cut their volume back a little bit so that you can hear yourself better. You may not know how to do that, but an audio engineer, maybe who's, again, never even mixed in-ears, is going to hear what you say, and they're going to have the tools and the talent and the technical know-how and ability to translate the problem you're having and find a solution based on techniques, tools, different concepts that they can teach you. So, pay a half-day rate or something, or half gig rate for an audio engineer to come in and listen to your in-ear mixes and try to help you. Again, let them hear your mix and provide you with feedback. Number 4 here, and this one's super important. Again, I hinted at this earlier, provide training. If you're a worship leader transitioning your band of volunteers to this, please, please, please don't decide on Thursday that you're going to use in-ears on Sunday. And the first time everyone shows up, you took away their music stand, you took away their guitar amp and told them to play with in-ears. I promise you, it's not going to go well. Please don't do that. So provide opportunities for your bandmates and for you to learn how to create good in-ear mixes. Again, consult with outside help. Have someone come in. Spend time doing it. Spend time finding content, listening to this podcast, the different videos we have on this channel about creating a good in-ear mix and creating a great experience for you and your band. And just devour that content. Everything you can find about it, find it. But then here's the important thing, test it. So go, okay, this guy said to do this. This girl said to do this. Try it, and which one works better for you, and whichever gives you the better result, go down that path. But you've got to provide training for you and your band. If you guys are going to transition to in-ears and you haven't set a timeline and you're not trying it and you're not getting outside help and you just step on stage and think, well, I'm a really good musician, so I'm going to download this app on my phone and mix my own in-ears, it ain't going to go well. I hate to tell you, it's not going to go well. But if you spend some time, you devote time to training, it is going to go well. I promise you, it will go well, particularly if you give it some time. 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, we're going to start using in-ears on stage. This is kind of our timeline, whatever it is, it's going to go well. Here's what I want to wrap up with. Again, we're going about 10 minutes. We'll go 2 to 3 more minutes. Again, I told you, it's not going to fake wood. It's going to be a quick episode. I want to end today's episode with, this is kind of segueing us into next week a bit. But if I only have 3 minutes to create an in-ear mix, here's my quick mix tip. Here's what I do. I want to share it with you to wrap this episode up. It's going to be incredibly beneficial. So listen carefully. Okay. You got 3 to 5 minutes to create your in-ear mix. Here's what I do. 1, I zero everything out. What I mean is I bring everything down to 0. I start from scratch. Maybe there's a recall, there's a reset button, whatever it is, get everything down, volume all the way down. Set your volume on your, personal monitoring system on your in-ear pack to about 3/4 up. Give yourself enough headroom. And then here's what you do. Start with yourself, turn yourself up, play, make sure you've got a good volume between you playing and hearing yourself in your ears. And then once you have that good, give yourself a timing reference. That timing reference could be click. It could be drums, whatever it is. Give yourself something so that you are sure you stay in time. I mentioned this earlier. For me, when I create it in your mix, my click is the loudest thing in the mix. I love it. It to the point where if I were to be singing next to a mic, the sound engineer has to tell me to turn the click down because it's bleeding into the mic. It's that loud. But I love hearing the click pretty loud. So some sort of timing reference. Next, you need some sort of pitch reference. That could be hopefully something that's not like a guitar, because that's going to go out of tune pretty easily, but maybe it's a piano. Maybe it's a synthesizer, something that's kind of solid and steady. Just something you can kind of test with to make sure I'm in time and I'm in pitch, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Next thing is figure out whoever you're trying to lock into or who you're trying to blend with. So if you're a drummer, bass player comes up. If you're a bass player, drums come up, right? To make sure that you can lock in with the drummer. If you're a vocalist, if you're a background vocalist, make sure you've got plenty of the lead vocal and then the other vocals you're trying to blend with. And then finally, everyone else, just start to bring up slowly but surely and leave them all at an equal volume. Now you could go from there and say, well, I don't need the BGV, so I'll leave them lower. That's great. But this is, again, a quick mix tip. How do we create a quick mix in 3 to 5 minutes? Those are my helpful tips. Well, at least I hope they're helpful tips on how to do that when you're in a pinch and need to really quickly make that happen. That's personally what I do. Now we're going to continue this conversation, and next week we're going to talk about how to improve your in-ear mix. I'll share some tips and approaches I take to mixing in-ears, some common misconceptions, and maybe the reason why you're struggling with the in-ear mix. And then we'll talk about some tips and things you could do without spending a dime to improve your in-ear mix. But in order to see that, you've got to hit subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to this. If you're on a podcast app, if you're watching on YouTube, you've got to hit subscribe, turn on the bell icon so you're notified when we post new content. Next week's episode is going to go live 10 a.m. Central on Monday, so you don't want to miss it. Be one of the first people in the world to listen to it. But again, you've got to follow, subscribe to the channel on your podcast app or on YouTube to check that out. And then make sure you stick around the YouTube channel. Again, I mentioned earlier, if you haven't checked that out yet, then head over to YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, because we're posting a lot of in-ear content this month. It's kind of the in-ear next couple weeks, which is going to be super, super fun. But would love to see you on next week's episode of Behind the Spacebar. And if not there, then maybe sometime throughout the week. Again, I post content every day, 10 a.m. Central. Would love to see you on one of the next ones. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. Bye.